Okay, this is for my pre-calculus class. This is our first lab in solving trig equations, and I have first and second degree trig equations on here, and I wanted to make sure that we could do this. The first page is in radians. I just wanted you to know that. So there's like the first 6 questions are in radians, and then the rest of the lab is in degrees. So I wanted to let you know that first. Before we get started, though, I want to kind of do some backup and to remind you of certain things about solving trig equations. Here's our steps. First of all, I always want you to do normal math first. Looking to see what math do you already know. Can I add, subtract, multiply, divide? If it's a quadratic, put it equal to 0, do all that stuff. Then we're going to isolate our trig function, and then I want you to draw the 4 quadrants, and you're going to put the quadrants where the angles could be. And I want you to keep in mind that all the points are plus plus in the first quadrant, negative positive in the second quadrant, negative negative in the third quadrant, and positive negative in the fourth quadrant. And we're talking all the points are cosine sine, cosine of the angle, and sine of the angle. So I know this is a review. I want you to remember that tangent is like slope, so it's positive here in those 2 quadrants and negative in those 2 quadrants. And I just want you to, that's kind of a review. And as we go through it, you'll see what I mean. I want you to use inverse trig functions to solve for the angle. And that's stuff we've done normally. But the fourth thing and you'll see this when we get through here, is if you have a negative value for your trig function, other than -1, then we're going to use the positive value and then use your reference angle to find it. So you probably don't know what I'm talking about yet, but I'll show you. So I wanted to do some background first. This is number 7, and I wanted to show you that on the left, I have x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. And some teachers do teach this when you've seen this before, if I were to look at what number 7 is with trig values, you'll see I have tangent squared, which is the same thing as saying tangent theta squared, which is our x squared. So, and then in the x spot here, it's tangent theta. So you'll see that what we do here will be very similar to what we do for this trig equation. It's only different at the end. So if I had x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0, one of the ways I could find what x could be would be to factor. So I did x minus 2 times x minus 3 equals 0. I drew my big T. I put each piece equal to 0. I'm going to get x is going to equal 2 and x is going to equal 3. That's one way to solve for x. The other way to solve for x is that's a quadratic. It's equal to 0, that I can stack and rack my a, b, c and find my discriminant and plug it in the quadratic formula. You'll see that I'll have x is 3 and x is 2. So I end up with the same answer. I will tell you that you can use a quadratic formula for all quadratic equations, but you can't factor them all. So when I go through to do all of this for the trig, this is exactly the same. When I get done, though, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have tan theta is going to equal this, 5 plus or minus radical 1 over 2. And if I add, I get a 3. And if I subtract, I get a -1. Excuse me, if I do subtraction, I'll get a 2. So I get the same values, all right? So I've got a 2 and a 3 here. But the one thing that's different is in the x spot is now tan theta. So you really have two equations. Tan theta is equal to 3 and tan theta is equal to 2. And then you're going to do inverse tan to find your angles. So we're going to do more of this, but I just wanted to show you that they're very similar to what you've done. But now we've got trig functions from here on. They're little trig equations that we're going to find the angle. So I'm going to start, first of all, with number 7, because we've kind of talked a little bit about it. So I'm going to skip the first page for right now, and I'm going to do number 7. And here's the same equation that we had. So we went through, I guess I'll show you the factoring again because that's what we did, but you could do both. And I've got tan theta minus 2 times tan theta minus 3, and that equals 0. And I'm going to do my big T here, put each piece equal to 0, so I have tan theta equals 2 and tan theta equals 3. So when you get to this part right here, I want you to look at the value. So we're going to do one side at a time. That's a positive 2. So in my calculator, I'm going to do the inverse tan of 2 because I have to do it on both sides here. I'm just going to show you this once because it kind of makes it messy. Because I'm looking for the angle, so that cancels that out. So when I do the inverse tan of 2, before I put that in my calculator, I want you to realize that the value is a positive 2. So here I know that tangent is positive in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 3. So when you put inverse tan of 2 in your calculator and you get a 63 degrees, that's all your calculator is going to give you is what's in quadrant 1. Okay? You have to say, but wait a minute, it's going to be positive down here. So you're going to add 180 plus 63. You're going to add them together. And when you do, you get it to be 248 degrees. So both of these angles work because this is 180. And that is not right. It's 243, not 248. I can't even read my writing. So let me undo that for a second here. This is 243. Sorry about that. I should know better. All right, so this is 63 degrees. And then when I add it to 180, it's 243 degrees, okay? So that works for those two. Now I'm going to look at tan theta is 3. Now I get this 3 is positive, so I'm still in the same two quadrants. So I'm going to do inverse tan of 3. When I do that, I actually get a 72 degrees. Well, 72 degrees is here in quadrant 1. Now I'm going to add 72 to 180, and when I do that, I get 252 degrees. So basically, you have 4 angles that if I put each one at a time in there, that would solve that equation. So here's our 4, and I usually start the small first, so I got 63 degrees. And then next was 72 degrees. Then we did 243 degrees, and then 252 degrees. Okay? So I don't want to make this video too long, but I'm going to do number 8. And then as I go along, I'll try to do a couple 3 in each video. So I have 4 sine squared theta minus 3 sine theta minus 1 equals 0. I look at it and say, I probably could factor this, but I'm going to show you another way we can do it. We're going to stack and rack. So A is 4. It's already set up nicely for the quadratic formula. B is negative 3. C is negative 1. D is b squared minus 4ac. So I get a nice number 25. So I say sine theta equals negative b plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 2a or 8. Then we're going to do our plus and our minus here. So I have 3 plus 5, which is 8 over 8. So I have a 1. And I have 3 minus 5, so that's negative 2 over 8, or a negative 1/4. Okay, so this right here is going to show you what I was talking about earlier. So the first thing we're going to put in our calculator after I draw my picture, so let's draw our picture. I have sine theta is 1. Now, I'm not going to say, oh, that's a positive 1, let me set it up. I know that if it's 1 or negative 1 or 0 for sine or cosine, I'm probably on a quadrant. So if I hit inverse sine of 1, I want to know what that it's going to be. I know that's 90 degrees. So that's what your calculator is going to give you this, all right? Because this is a 0.01. Then I want you to check all the other quadrants. So I know this is negative 1, 0, so sine is 0 there. This is 1, 0 for 0 degrees, so that's 0 there. And here I have 0, negative 1. So there's only going to be one quadrant that works, so there's 90 degrees, so that's one of the answers for this first part. Now I'm going to do inverse sine. Now here is where this is important. This is a negative number, so I know sine is negative in quadrant 3 and 4. Okay, so if I put a negative in, your calculator wants to go this way first to give you an answer, or it'll come here. It never really gives you a quadrant 3 answer. It'll give you a 1 or 2 or a 4. But it gets confusing trying to figure out this one. So what I would suggest is that you put in your calculator the inverse sine of positive 1/4. Then that way you can get a nice reference angle. So when I do that, I get 14 degrees as a reference angle. 14 degrees lives in quadrant 1. So here's 14 degrees. So that's not an answer because it's really a negative. So you're going to take 180 and add 14 and 360 and subtract 14. So what you get for those two is you're going to get 194 here. And then if I take 360 minus 14, I'm going to get 346. Those are the answers. I just use this to find it in those two quadrants. So let's go back and put it in here. So our first one we found was 90 degrees. That was one side. The other side was 194 degrees and 346 degrees. So I'm going to continue to do videos. So if you get stuck, you can always come back.